I'm a director at Binance Labs and also the founder of MicroTraction. Man, I'll need to go back about 5 years. But I grew up in Nigeria, went to medical school in London, went to King's College London. I opted out after my third year and decided to focus on technology because I felt that was a space where I could have a lot more impact on the continent. I wasn't technical, so I taught myself how to program and also design mobile applications. Started a company right after leaving medical school, the startup field. But I always say I learned a lot from that experience, and I also became, technical. Before I moved back to Nigeria, myself and a friend built apps that we thought were interesting for ourselves as well as for anyone who was non-technical and needed to build products. I moved back to Nigeria in 2015, and I joined Dotun. He's currently a partner at Novostar, but at the time he started a company called Starter. And I always, it was probably one of the best emails I've written in my life because I think that helped me start with my journey in tech in Africa. So I sent a cold email to Dotun on Christmas Day, and I said, "Hi Dotun, I'm Yele. This is what I've done in the past. I like what you're doing. You don't have to pay me, and this is where I can add value." And so he responded, and we had sort of like a 2 to 3 hour conversation, I think, on Christmas Day. And we started working together. And when I moved back to Nigeria, it was really about saying, number one, I wanted to learn about the ecosystem. I wanted to build my network, form a thesis about Africa, and then decide on what I wanted to do next. And so that was how I transitioned, or I supported Dotun as sort of like the partner on the ground. And Starter was an online community and resource platform for African entrepreneurs. We scaled that to about 28,000 entrepreneurs across Africa, and the company got acquired sort of about 7 months in. But one of the big challenges that I realized at the time was that there was a lack of funding for African entrepreneurs. I still think there is. Compared to other developed ecosystems, you don't have sort of like the amount of angel capital going into kind of technology businesses or startups or ventures, and so we wanted to solve that problem with MicroTraction. So we set up a small fund that basically allowed anyone anywhere to sort of apply for funding. And in the last sort of 2 years, entrepreneurs from across Africa, majority of them from Western Africa, have applied for funding. We funded about 9 companies, and on track to do maybe north of 15 companies by the end of the year. So it's pretty exciting. And so that's sort of like my journey up until I got into Bitcoin and digital currency. So I think I actually remember the first time I sort of, like my first kind of like Bitcoin story. Maybe I've read about Bitcoin before, but like the first person I knew that had Bitcoin was someone who was also in medical school. Her dad had bought a Bitcoin when she was getting into school, and the price of Bitcoin was going up. And I was thinking like, man, this is pretty interesting, but I didn't think about buying Bitcoin. I remember going on some of the websites and thinking, wow, these are really nice or well-designed websites. But I would say like my deep interest in Bitcoin probably came, and cryptocurrencies came maybe about 2 years ago. I like most people in tech, I used to Twitter a lot. And I just remembered seeing an increase in the number of tech Twitter people that I follow talking about Bitcoin. So, you had Naval Ravikant, you had sort of Gary Tan, Balaji, Stevenson, all talking about Bitcoin and blockchain and sort of like what it does. And at the time I was already investing, and so I decided, you know what, so one of the best ways to actually learn about this technology is to invest in a company. Ended up investing in a company called Bitcoins. They built one of the earliest applications that allowed you to buy Bitcoin and Ethereum with Nigerian Naira. They ended up getting into YC. I think they were the first African crypto company to get into Y Combinator. And I think what really made me become passionate about Bitcoin and sort of like blockchain and digital currency was my understanding of what I felt the impact could be on the continent. I genuinely feel blockchain and its applications are better suited for Africa than anywhere else. And that's just because I think blockchain and digital currencies are the first technological innovation that are trying to reinvent social and economic systems, right? So we've had technology eat. You know, Mark Andreessen's talked about this idea of technology, of software and technology eating the world. And that has happened everywhere apart from finance, right? As well as, and when I say finance, I mean like, you know, not changing the way people access things. I mean like a core innovation to what we know as money or like value and how we create value and how we transmit value. So it's a core sort of like innovation for money. And I think for Africa especially, it allows us or gives an opportunity for us to sort of reinvent or create new systems for economic coordination and activity. And for me, that was very powerful. This idea that individuals and organizations could sort of engage in economic activity and sort of like collaborate and transact without the need or a trust of a middleman or a centralized authority was powerful. And so like most people get into crypto, I went down this rabbit hole and, you know, I would say, I like to say it's never been the same. I pretty much think about blockchain and digital currency, you know, more than 90% of the time. So I always say it's kind of like serendipity. Obviously, like most people in crypto, I'd heard about Binance, and I was actually a big fan of the company, or rather the organization. You know, I think Binance is the future of what organizations will look like. The company is decentralized, has employees all around the world. Some people have never met each other, and we're all working towards this common goal of spreading the freedom of money and building the next generation of digital infrastructure. But I think like I loved Binance primarily because of CZ and kind of like the kind of person, you know, he seemed. And, you know, I remember when CZ came to Uganda for a conference, and I remember thinking like, wow, like here is sort of like the leader of this company that is kind of one of the main companies in a new era of technology, coming to Africa sort of like within 2 years or 1 year of inception. That's like, you know, Larry Page and Sergey Brin coming to Africa 2 years into Google, or same thing with Jeff Bezos, or even Jack Ma of Alibaba. And it showed two things. Number one was that Africa has come a long way, that we're no longer sort of like an afterthought. And it also showed the willingness of Binance as an organization to actually sort of like be global from day one. And so, you know, I'd always admired the company from afar, and I've admired CZ from afar. And you know, when I was traveling to San Francisco, I basically just told people in my network that I would love to connect with anyone interested in crypto and interested in Africa, you know, just to have a conversation. And so at the time, I had an associate at Microtraction who introduced me to a friend who worked at a crypto company in the US. And then he had just recently moved from that company and joined Binance. So although we sort of like had a phone call before I got to the US, he was not going to be in the US during that time, and he was like, oh, I think you should meet Christy. So Christy is also the director at Binance Labs, and you know, I remember that conversation, and you know, we just spoke about Africa, spoke about investing, spoke about blockchain, and it was a fantastic conversation. At the end of the conversation, I remember saying, I was like, Christy, this is what I would do if I was Binance Labs in Africa, and this is what I would do if I was Binance in Africa. And she was like, Yele, I think you should join Binance. And I was like, I wasn't expecting sort of like her to ask me on the spot, but I took a lot of time to think about it. Spoke to some of my partners at Microtraction, as well as my LPs, and I think like everybody understood, the passion and sort of like, the fact that I genuinely believe in the potential of this technology, and Binance was going to give me the opportunity to sort of realize some of these ideas, or explore some of these ideas that I have about the intersection of blockchain and in Africa. And it's been, I think my Binance birthday is coming up. 1 year will be 1 year in November, and it's been one of the best experiences of my life. I've learned a lot about running a company, about building an organization, about community, about values, about integrity, hard work. And yeah, it's a blessing to be a part of an amazing team and a company. So at the end of the day, we like to think that Binance is global. Although I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria, as Binance and as Binance Labs, we're interested in spreading the freedom of money. So it was good for me to visit Nairobi and sort of, meet not just some of the entrepreneurs and projects in blockchain, but also to meet some of the people building products and projects, within the general digital technology ecosystem. So over the last couple of days, I've attended a conference. There was a meetup earlier where I was able to meet some of the key people in the blockchain ecosystem, and it's just been like networking, learning about the market, hopefully trying to find projects and opportunities for Binance to be involved in the local ecosystem. Yeah, I think I'll say I'm traveling tomorrow, going back to Lagos, and I have this feeling and the impression of wanting to come back and spend more time here. I've met a bunch of interesting folks across sort of various lines, whether that's technical people, projects building sort of decentralized applications, some exchanges, and it's a pretty vibrant ecosystem. Like most ecosystems in Africa, it's early, it's young, but you can feel sort of like the passion and the willingness to build. I think one thing I would say about the Nairobi ecosystem that sort of differentiates it a bit from the Nigerian ecosystem is I'm pretty impressed by some of the technical guys. The fact that you have sort of like a local community running a node, or running nodes and sort of being block producers for multiple blockchains is pretty good. I think most ecosystems struggle from a lack of technical talent, and it's not just about sort of talking about the usefulness and potential of blockchain. We want people to build, and it's exciting to have individuals in this ecosystem building stuff. So as Binance, we have one of our portfolio companies based out of Kenya, right? So Raise is one of the companies that we funded from our incubation program, and then the first African fellow from Binance X is actually here as well. So I'd never met Eddie Cargo before, and it was good to sort of like meet in person and sort of discuss the project it's building and sort of offer advice and continue to explore ways that Binance could support the product is developing for the ecosystem. Yeah. So our thesis when we were looking at investing on the continent was sort of like trying to tie that back to our core mission, which is about spreading the freedom of money, right? And enabling economic freedom. One of the key things that most people in crypto don't realize is that this technology actually has sort of exclusion challenges, right? So if you don't have a smartphone and you don't have the internet, there is no way for you to actually own digital currency or get access to decentralized and open finance. And so one of the phrases that I coined is crypto inclusion, similar to financial inclusion, but it's about saying how do you make this technology a lot more accessible to the average African on the street. So we invested in 5 companies. 2 of them were from Nigeria, and we had 1 each from Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. The 2 Nigerian companies, Yellow Card enables anyone to buy sort of Bitcoin and other digital currencies with cash. We have agent networks. Everywhere I go around, I see sort of like the green kiosk of M-Pesa, and this is kind of like the pathway or the gateway for people with cash to sort of like do transactions digitally. So Yellow Card follows a similar model with a series of a network of agents that allows you to just buy cash with crypto or buy crypto with cash and vice versa. We invested in Bitsika. They built the first USSD crypto wallet, which means that if you have a feature phone, you can own and hold crypto. We also did a company called Zend. Zend is a wallet that enables you to do microtransactions on chain, and they're working with one of our other portfolio companies, Matic Network. Then we did Raise. Raise is a cap table management software that allows these companies and small businesses digitize their securities. And then the final company is based out of founded by South African founders. It's Fishwort, and they built an extension that pretty much prevents users, consumers, and businesses from falling into phishing attacks. So I think 5 out of 13 companies is a pretty decent percentage of businesses to come from Africa for Binance, and that shows the commitment to the continent. Yeah. So I think that's probably a misconception, just because we recently did a meetup. I think the last meetup in Africa was actually in South Africa, and I believe we have a couple of Binance Angels as well who lead community efforts in South Africa. And then, like I said earlier, one of the portfolio companies that we invested in was also a South African company. So we're definitely sort of like active in South Africa, and we're sort of figuring out ways to actually expand, our initiatives across the continent. But yeah, South Africa is definitely one of the markets that we care about. And I believe that within the next 12 to 24 months, we would have a lot more activity as Binance on the continent. To be honest, I don't think I woke up one day and said I want to be someone that funds companies. I think I care about creating enabling environments for people, and because that allows you to have outsized impact. If I was solving one specific problem, so if I took a subset of a problem, let's say I wanted to make it easy for people to maybe buy, shoes or secondhand shoes. Potentially that could be a big market, but that's a very specific problem. My decision or my interest in venture capital or investing comes from a place of having to have kind of leveraged impact on Africa, which means, with MicroTraction and Binance, been fortunate enough to support north of 20 plus companies, solving 20 various problems across Africa. So I think that's kind of the first thing. But I think, getting into investing is easy, but it requires someone that has kind of like intellectual curiosity and honesty. You have to be passionate and curious about ideas. You have to be someone that loves talking to entrepreneurs and sort of like helping them figure out sort of like the challenges that they have. You have to have which means you have to have very good communications and people skills. With Microtraction, we actually launched a scout program wherein we got about 90 or 100, about 100, approximately 100 applications from individuals and operators from across Africa who wanted to invest in their own local markets. So that's sort of like one potential way someone can get into the space. Another way would be to find a venture firm or an investor that you like, connect with them on Twitter, find their email, reach out, ask intelligent questions, and send them deals that you think are interesting. And that's sort of like how I got into venture as well, right? Like I was recommending startups to YC, 500, Techstars, and even some of the local angels. And that allowed me to sort of like build a reputation of being able to sort of find companies early, and that led to sort of like running certain Microtraction, and which led to obviously the opportunity with Binance. So I think that's kind of like what I would recommend as well. So definitely, I think would love to be back Q1 next year. I think I would try to make it an habit to visit Nairobi at least once every quarter, and not just Nairobi, also the same with Ghana, South Africa, and other sort of like Uganda, other markets that we think are quite active. And I would probably focus a lot more on meeting developers. I've always been biased towards sort of like people who build, and we were able to leverage sort of like technology. And then I'm also curious about sort of like education programs, because sometimes, there's people have the will, but they don't have the knowledge or the mentorship to build or learn how to use some of these technologies. So probably something that interacts between those two, connecting with developers and sort of like, potentially figuring out some, educational programs to get more people aware of the technology and sort of building on technology itself.